welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And I'm Mick and I am an alcoholic.
Both serving as your secretary today. Please join me for a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting. And Angie is going to read the preamble for us.
Hi, Angie Alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Angie. A very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat is now disabled and until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host. If you feel the meeting security is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so that they can check it out. We also suggest that if you are mindful about sharing your private information in the open chat pre and post meeting, and perhaps also consider sharing only your email address in the first instance instead of your phone number.
Thanks, Mick. Our speaker today is Jane D. You're unmuted there, Jen. Jane, you know the story. You read your story, tell the inside and outside story of it, and stay talking as long as you like.
Okay.
There's no timer on you. Thanks a million, Jane, and it is being recorded.
Okay. Thanks, Mossy. Hi, everyone. My name is Jane, and I'm an alcoholic. All right. Yeah, so I'm also the student of life on page 319. For at least for now, the 5th edition of the big book is in progress. And a lot of people ask me, how do I feel about that? Do I hope that my story would be carried over into that edition? And I can honestly say that I am so grateful for having had the opportunity to tell my story to people I probably I've not even met, that I would really be very happy if my story were replaced with another story, a new one, Spirit of Rotation. It has been an amazing gift, and I'm very, very grateful for it. But it has also been over 20 years. This book came out in 2001, and I wrote my story in February of 1998. And my sobriety date is December 30th, 1991. And I got sober when I was 26 years old, and I'll let you guys do the math. I live outside of Philadelphia. I have my whole life lived in this area. And I heard about the grapevine, my grapevine rep from my home group was Women's Honesty in Feasterville, Pennsylvania. And she said that they were looking for stories for a 4th edition of the big book. And I had about 6 years sober then. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I would love to write it out just as healing, catharsis, just something that would feel good. So at that time, I had one of those little like IBM, really thin, putty colored tower computers. The screen was about this big. And when I typed, the letters came up in green font. And that was my first computer. And I typed my story on that. I printed it out on a dot matrix printer. And then the next day I did some editing, just read through it again, made a couple changes, printed it out again, and sent it off and forgot all about it. And it was a very very satisfying feeling to write it out and feel good about it. It wasn't until a few years later that I read in the grapevine that they were about to choose the last. The numbers are not going to be right, but the basic idea was there were about 40 stories. They were down to 40 stories. They were going to take half of them And I thought, oh, that's right. I sent my story off a while ago, like a lot, like years, and I had moved. My forwarding address would not be, they wouldn't forward anything. So I felt like an idiot, but I emailed the editor of the Grapevine and said, I know that this is a really silly, and I feel very foolish, but I don't want to regret anything or wonder. I sent my story in and my contact information has all changed and it won't be forwarded. And I got an email about 40 minutes later from a woman, I think her name was, it was Valerie or Victoria, something like that with a V. And she was the chairperson of the GSO Literature Committee. And she said, your story is still under consideration. So please send your contact information, your updated contact information. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh my God. I was overwhelmed. My husband who's also in recovery, both very excited. They let me know about when they would make their decision. So I was watching my mailbox at that point. I was expecting, a package of my story printed out with, red letter edits or blue pen edits or whatever they do. And then I would have to initial them, any changes that they made. And so when a business envelope showed up that was very thin, and light, I figured, well, I guess they didn't take my story. Thankfully, I opened the envelope. There were 2 pieces of paper in it. And the first piece of paper said, we want to use your story. And the second piece of paper said, sign it over. They did not care what I thought of any changes they made. Talk about keeping it simple. And you know what? It made it really easy for me too. Just, all right, here you go. They wanted to know if the Grapevine owned my story, because apparently they're 2 separate things, the Grapevine and GSO. And so no, it's all yours. So they took it. They did not make that many changes. They cut some sentences out for length, I guess. And they corrected some incredibly embarrassing grammatical errors and misspellings. But otherwise, and it's not the same title. That's not what I called it. But the first thing I saw when I saw Student of Life, all I thought was SOL, which in the US means, shit out of luck. Sorry for the rough language there, but that's what Americans think of when they see SOL. Anyway, so I was absolutely floored, absolutely thrilled. I had a person I call my mean sponsor at the time. She was, even at that time, in 2001 is when I found out, 2001 is when I found out. And she had 30 years back then, and she got sober in Akron. And I said, look, I really am nervous about this. I don't want anyone to put me on a pedestal or think I'm some kind of AA guru or something. And she said, and why would anyone do that? Because you write well? And that was the dish rag in the face that I needed. That yes, the literature committee was trying to reach as much of a diverse group as possible, trying to get more women, trying to get more diversity in the stories. So I must be a garden variety drunk. And I just told it well, that's all. And I'm still so unbelievably grateful for that. So one of the things I say as far as grateful, yes, that other people can be helped. Someone in Utah, someone in France or wherever could be reading this and getting help from it. But one of the things for me, since I came in at 26, which at the time in the early 90s was still fairly young, and so I still had a lot of that. Was it just a phase? Was I really that bad? I was young. I had a lot of drinking, but a lot of my friends drank like that. They stopped, but I ignored that piece of it. But I really, was I really that bad? And so if I really sat down and thought about it, if the literature committee of the General Service Office of Alcoholics Anonymous thinks that your story belongs in the big book, then guess what? you're a drunk. And that was that I needed that. I've never had those thoughts since. I've never had that stinking thinking in that regard since then. And I am very grateful for that. Because my head can do a number on me, as I'm sure we're all familiar with. Anyway, so again, I wrote this in 1998, February of 1998. And so I will read through it again, and which is usually good because I want to make sure I get my facts straight. It's amazing what you forget after all these years. And I'll give little updates and embellishments on what actually happened. So I started drinking at age 18, rather a late bloomer by today's standards. But after I started, the disease of alcoholism hit me with a vengeance and made up for lost time. After I had been drinking for several years and seriously wondering if I did indeed have a problem with alcohol, I read one of the "Are You an Alcoholic?" quiz type checklists. Much relieved, I found that almost nothing applied to me. I had never lost a job, a spouse, children, or any material possessions through alcohol. The fact that my drinking hadn't allowed me to gain any of those things crossed my mind only after I came into AA. And that is 100% true. I really thought that I didn't do any of this. I didn't have any of those issues. But it never dawned on me that you don't have these things because you never gained them because you were drinking. I can't blame 1 ounce of my drinking on my upbringing. My parents were loving and supportive and had been married 35 years. My parents are still alive, and in December, they will be married 62 years. So I had a very stable upbringing. There was no household is normal, but dysfunction is too strong of a word for my household growing up. There were oddballs and things, but just oddities. That's the word I was looking for. But very stable household growing up. We were not wealthy, but money was not an issue. My parents both had good jobs, but again, we weren't wealthy. We just didn't have any financial issues. My dad was very careful with their money. Anyway, no one else in my family exhibits alcoholic drinking or alcoholic behavior. That is true. I have a younger sister, and if she drinks 2 wine coolers, she'll start singing. And if they still even make wine coolers, she drinks wine, but my parents don't have any alcohol in they live in senior living right now. They don't have any alcohol in their house. My dad would drink one dark beer after he would get home from work every day, and that was it. It would take him about a month to get through a case of dark beer, like Dos Equis or something. That's not the way I drank, and I didn't even like beer. Well, let's see. For some reason, despite the resources available to me growing up, I developed into an adult woman terrified of the world around me. I was extremely insecure, though I was careful to hide this fact. I was unable to handle and understand my emotions. I always felt as if everyone else knew what was going on and what they were supposed to be doing, and my life was the only one that was delivered without an instruction book. And I have felt that way ever since I was young. I would look at other people, like young meaning a child. I would look at other people and think, how do they know where to go, what room to go to, what form to fill out, how to open their locker, who to ask for this or that. Everyone seemed to know what they were doing, and I felt like a fraud in every way you can imagine, even as a kid. When I discovered alcohol, everything changed. I took my first real drink my first night at college. I attended what was to be the first of many, many fraternity parties. I didn't care for the beer, so I went to the vat of innocuous-looking punch. I was told it was laced with grain alcohol. I don't remember how many drinks I had, and my recollections of the actual events of the rest of the night are fuzzy. But I do remember this much. When I was drinking, I was okay. I understood. Everything made sense. I could dance, talk, and enjoy being in my own skin. It was as if I had been an unfinished jigsaw puzzle with one piece missing. As soon as I took a drink, that last piece instantly and effortlessly snapped into place. If I could change anything in here, I would say there were a few pieces missing. There were several pieces missing, but the point is the same. Alcohol made me feel like I finally had the instruction book. It made me finally feel like I knew what to do. like everybody else did. Saying that it made me feel whole is a trite phrase, but that it did. It made me feel like I was right. I had just felt so wrong and so off. And it just made me, everything just all of a sudden fit into place. I don't remember getting home that night, and I woke up the next morning completely dressed and in full makeup and alone, thank goodness. I was sick as a dog, but I managed to crawl into the shower and prepare for my first college class. I sat through the entire class, pleading with my eyes to the professor to let us out early. He kept us to the bell, and when it rang, I flew into the women's room, crashed into the first stall, and threw everything up. The insanity of the disease had already manifested itself. I recall thinking as I knelt retching in the stall that this was fantastic. Life was great. I had finally found the answer: alcohol. Yes, I overdid it the night before, but I was new to this game. I only had to learn how to drink right, and I was set. And there's a line that I think it's on page, I've got a big book right in front of me. How about that? Page 30 or page 50, where they say, I guess page 30, then it's not 50. The idea that somehow and someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. To me, it was more than that. It was that, yes, but I wanted that feeling again. I wanted that feeling of feeling right and feeling whole. But the line that really gets it for me is the next one. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. It is astonishing when I look back at how much I chased that feeling again, and never really got it back to the first level that I had at that first night drinking at that fraternity party. That when I remember that, it reminds me of how cunning, baffling, and powerful is not just, it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. When I first heard how it works, those are the words that stuck with me: cunning, baffling, and powerful. Like, oh, I get that. Yes, I get that. I attempted to drink right for the next 8 years. My progression was phenomenal. There's absolutely no period in my drinking career that can be described as social drinking, and that is true. I never just drank socially. I flew over the line, never looked back. I blacked out almost every time I put alcohol in my system, but decided I could live with that. It was a small price to pay for the power and confidence alcohol gave me. After drinking for less than 6 months, I was almost a daily drinker. I wound up on academic probation. I had always been on the honor roll in high school, my first semester sophomore year, and my response to that was to change my major. So here I want to hold up a bit. I believe you had Brian speak for you, the window of opportunity guy, and he says this so perfectly that I'm going to plagiarize, or at least I'm going to credit him, that what it's really important here is changing my major. I changed my major from a curriculum that I chose because I knew, even as a child, what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had this career path that I wanted to do. Everything I did, as far as volunteering, books that I read, were straight aligned with this path. And all it took was 1 year of college, like 7 months of drinking, before I realized that I couldn't do that curriculum with labs and science classes and all that and still drink. So I changed my major. And I don't think normal drinkers change their life decisions, like major life decisions, based on whether they can drink or not. And Brian, I'm going to try to say this by memory and not botch it. He says that normal people change their behavior to match their goals, whereas alcoholics change their goals to match their behavior. And that's exactly what I did. And it didn't even cross my mind at that time that I should be concerned about this. My life on campus revolved around parties, drinking, and men. I surrounded myself with people who drank as I did. Even though several people had already expressed their concern over my drinking, I rationalized that I was only doing what every other red-blooded college student did. Somehow I managed to graduate, but while most of my friends were securing good jobs and abruptly stopping their boozing, I seemed to be left behind on campus. I had resolved that I too would now settle down and drink properly, but to my frustration, I found I could not do so. I took a pitiful sales job that paid next to nothing, so I continued to live with my parents. At this point, I'm with my parents. I have no friends. I'm not involved in a relationship. All my high school friends are gone. My college friends aren't near where I live with my parents. I am simply living with my parents and doing this job. That's it. I kept this job for 2 years. It allowed me to drink with minimal interference. My pattern was to pick up a fifth of whiskey somewhere during my round of appointments and keep it under the car seat with me. When I got home in the evening, I drank at least half the fifth in front of the television set and watched reruns until I passed out. And I did this every night by myself for almost 2 years. I had become a daily isolated drinker and was starting to get a little nervous. So what I used to watch, and I'm not sure if the show will mean anything to people, but it was Columbo. And it was part of a murder mystery late night television. Columbo was a rumpled old detective from Los Angeles Police Department TV show. Peter Falk played him. And I just loved that show. And I wrote that in here. I wrote that I watched old Columbo reruns until I passed out. And they took it out. They didn't see it's not there. And one of my friends, when the story was published, she really had a resentment that they took out Columbo, that they took that out, and she spun over to someone else's story and said, "Look, they left MASH in. They left the reference to MASH in this guy's story. Why'd they take out Columbo? I don't know. I don't really care. It's not my this is it's sort of a not let it go. What's really important? First things first. This is not a first thing." And that friend, unfortunately, is no longer in this program. But anyway, that wasn't the point I was trying to make. But I did think it was odd that they took it out. But whatever. My behavior at this point was textbook. I was stashing bottles all over the house, sneaking drinks from my parents' small supply when I ran out, rationing the number of bottles I threw away at a time so trash bags wouldn't clink, and refilling my parents' vodka and gin bottles with water, and so on. I had resorted to videotaping my favorite reruns while I was watching them because I always blacked out before the ending. So I had it's VHS. This is back, late 80s. VHS, and it was one of those VHS not a cabinet, it's a shelf that you stick up on the wall, and all the tapes with all these Columbos on the back of these tapes. So I had this, it was portable, but it was big, it was heavy, but I had it. About this time, the TV movie My Name is Bill W. about the co-founder of AA was aired. Intrigued, I sat down with my whiskey and soda bottles to watch it. When Bill whipped out a flask in the car to bolster himself before a visit with his father-in-law, I heaved a sigh of relief. Oh, I'm not that bad, I thought to myself. I then proceeded to get drunk and black out. I don't remember any more of the movie. Since I've written this, we all know that we can get anything on any streaming service or DVDs you could buy anywhere. So I have purchased this movie, My Name is Bill W., and I've watched it several times, and it's really wonderful. My parents were at a total loss. I was going nowhere, and I was irritable and hostile. Since they had no experience with alcohol, they had no idea what was wrong with me or what to do about it, and neither did I. I knew I drank too much and that my life was miserable, but I never made the connection between those two conditions. My parents made the only suggestion that then made sense to them. They offered to help me financially if I wanted to go back to school. Seeing no other way out, I jumped at the opportunity. I spent 2 years in graduate school, 750 miles from home. So I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is where I was born. Actually, I was born in Champaign, Illinois. My parents met there. They were graduate students at the University of Illinois. So I felt like I was coming full circle. So surely this would fix everything. I can honestly say I know why they call it a geographical cure. for about 9 months, I was able to cut my drinking down sharply. I still drank almost every day, but not to the point of my usual stupors, and I didn't black out very often. And I did get, when I was out there in Illinois in this graduate program, I did have a reputation as a big drinker. And I would look at them like, you've got to be kidding. This is nothing. I'm not drinking anything right now. This is, well, I'm drinking, but I'm not drinking like I used to. I've cut back. I'm good. I was able to concentrate on my schoolwork that first year and make lots of friends. And I still am in contact with a lot of those friends. However, geographical cures are only temporary. Mine lasted a little less than a year. After about 10 months or so, I slowly started to slide back into my old patterns. Steadily, I worked my way back to the same quantities of whiskey I drank at home, and the blackouts returned. My grades started to drop, and my friends started to wonder. I even began watching reruns again. I had brought my homemade videotapes with me to school. Yes, I had brought that cabinet. That's why I was talking about that whole cabinet in my car, in the trunk, and brought it with me to school. Fortunately, I managed to graduate, but I had gone nowhere. So if this was a 2-year program, if it had been longer than that, I don't know if I would have made it, because it was like a ski slope. I was really shooting down back into my addiction to where it, as if I had like back to where I was, getting worse and worse. I managed to graduate, but I had gone nowhere. After graduation, I returned to my parents' house as I had been unsuccessful in securing a job. I was back. Back in my old bedroom, back to the same routine of drinking every evening until I passed out, and it was getting worse. I was starting earlier and earlier and consuming more and more liquor. I had no job, no friends. I saw no one but my parents. I was beyond frustration at this point. Hadn't I done everything that was expected of me? Hadn't I graduated from college and gone on to earn a master's degree? I had never gone to jail, crashed any cars, or got into any trouble like a real alcoholic would. When I was working, I never missed a day because of drinking. I never ran myself into debt, nor had I abused a spouse or children. Sure, I drank a lot, but I didn't have a problem. How could I when I hadn't done any of the things that prove you're an alcoholic? So what was the problem? All I really wanted was a decent job so I could be independent and productive. I could not understand why life just wouldn't cut me a break. And that is really what I thought. I thought I just want a good job and I'll work hard. I just need a good job. I was watching my friends get married, have real jobs, like my friends from college, where I thought they drank like I did, but I guess not. They were having kids and they were living their lives. And I seemed to be completely crippled, stuck, unable to move, unable to do anything, and also completely unable to see that alcohol was what was the source of the issue, that alcohol was the problem. Could not see that, did not want to see that, obviously. I did odd projects around the house for my parents to earn my keep until I took a job with a local entrepreneur. The job did not offer much opportunity for advancement, nor did it pay very well, but it got me out of the house, got me out of my parents' house. I couldn't move. I was still living with them, but it got me out of the house for the day. And it was challenging in many ways, and it sure was. It was basically a guy who was, he was a free spirit, if you want to call him that, got high on pot every afternoon. And I had no interest in that. I was completely loyal to my one true love, which was alcohol. But he designed accessories for the action sports market, which was just starting back then. The skateboarding, snowboarding, the extreme sports. And he would design jewelry, keychains, stuff that they wear on their belts and boots and things and put on their equipment. So he would go up to New York and talk to vendors up there for supplies, and I would simply run his business. And it was very challenging because it was very active for such a small business. And he's still in business today and he's doing well. It's a small business, but he's doing well. At this point, I was in a vicious battle to control my drinking. I knew that if I took only one drink, I'd lose complete control and drink until I passed out. That was the only thing I understood when I came into the rooms. It's the first drink that gets you drunk. I was like, duh. Yeah, I knew that. I got that. Everything else, nothing, made no sense. Easy does it, first things first, one day at a time, completely over my head, made no sense. But I knew it was the first drink that got me drunk, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know, that just clicked with me. I knew that before I even came in. Nevertheless, I tried day after day to beat this obsession with alcohol. Before I came into the rooms, even though I knew it was the first drink, I would still try to, that's what I meant in that sentence. I tried to beat it, and I never beat it. Once I kicked that craving off, I was a goner. I picked up a half-gallon of whiskey one day after work, drank over a third of it in less than 4 hours that same night. I was so sick the next day, but I made it to work. When I got home from work, I sat on my parents' sofa, and I knew I would start working on the half-gallon again, despite the fact that I was still very ill from the night before. I also knew that I did not want to drink. Sitting on that sofa, I realized that the old "I could stop if I wanted to, I just don't want to" didn't apply here, because I did not want to drink. I watched myself get up off the sofa and pour myself a drink. When I sat back down on the sofa, I started to cry. My denial had cracked. I believe I hit bottom that night, but I didn't know it then. I just thought I was insane. And I proceeded to finish the half-gallon, which I did. 6 months later, my boss flew me to California for a trade show. I hated working the shows, but I loved to travel, so I went. I was extremely nervous about this trip because my boss liked to party, and we were flying in a guy our age from Hawaii to work the show with us. At this point, I had managed to hold together 31 days without a drink, and I was terrified I would give in to the temptation of being on an all-expense-paid trip in a fun city with 2 party animals. It had been very difficult for me to stay dry for 31 days. The obsession spoke to me every day. So I was scheduled to have surgery, and I had also done all this reading. I went to the library, took out all these books on alcoholism, because I figured if I learned, knowledge would fix it, just like, Bill W. says in our literature that's something that we tried and failed. And I knew that anything medical, like a major surgery, that had to be done. And so I talked to my doctor about my drinking, and he said, well, it'll come up on the blood tests or whatever if there's an issue. And that scared me dry. It made me get dry because I needed, this surgery had to happen. I had absolutely no intention of staying sober after the surgery. I was trying to stay dry to get through the surgery, and then I would start drinking again. But that's why I was 31 days dry. When it's San Diego, California, which, if you're familiar with the geography at all, is right over the border from Tijuana, Mexico, which at the time was fine to go to. You had to be careful, but it was a lot of fun. Anyway, I arrived late on a Friday and managed not to drink that night. The next morning at the show, I was offered the gift that changed my life. Our Hawaiian sales rep seemed frustrated. I thought he was disappointed that he hadn't managed to write an order for a couple he had just finished working with. I went over to console him. He said no, his mood had nothing to do with the couple. Instead, he explained that just this week he had lost his girlfriend, dropped out of school, lost his apartment, and also lost his full-time job. He added, I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for 1.5 years, except I just drank again this past week. I'm a mess about it. At that very instant, I heard one word in my head. The word was now. And I knew it meant say something now. To my amazement, I spoke the words, Mike, I think I'm one too. Mike's mood instantly changed. I recognized now it was hope. We started talking, and among other things, I told him I hadn't had a drink for about a month, but didn't go to AA. When he asked why I had avoided AA, I told him it was because I didn't think I had hit bottom. Somehow he didn't laugh, but said, you hit bottom when you stopped digging. He took me to my first 3 AA meetings. And right here, I want to say, so I don't forget, that Mike is still sober. Mike is still sober. He just celebrated 32 years in February. He has, he married his current wife soon after we met in San Diego. They have 2 daughters, one of them still in college, one of them has graduated. They have 2, they have their own business in Kauai, the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And he's doing really, really well. Right now, as we speak, he's on vacation in New Zealand with his wife. So we're Facebook friends. I saw him last year. We visited Hawaii, my family, and I saw him in 2017 when we visited Hawaii for the first time for me. And we're still in touch, and we still look at it like it's one of those quote unquote everyday miracles, because he's often said that if he hadn't had this relapse before he and I met, he probably wouldn't have said anything. He wouldn't to me, or he would have been fine. He wouldn't have been as distraught as he was, and our conversation would never have happened. So whether that means, how, we don't know how things would have played out, but not that I'm glad he relapsed so that I got sober, but given the way things work, this is how it worked out. It was the second meeting that clinched my resolve to pursue sobriety. There were about 35 people in attendance, but the space was small, so the meeting seemed very crowded. Being from out of town, I stood up and introduced myself when asked to by the chairperson. Later on in the meeting, the chairperson called on me to share. I got up and somehow walked over to the microphone and podium. I'd never been so nervous in my life, but the words came out naturally as I described the event that led up to the meeting that night. As I spoke, I looked around the room. More importantly, I looked at the faces of the people in the room, and I saw it. I saw the understanding, the empathy, the love. Today, I believe I saw my higher power for the first time in those faces. While still up at the podium, it hit me. This is what I have been looking for all my life. This was the answer right here in front of me. Indescribable relief came over me. I knew the fight was over. And that is exactly how it happened. And if I can still remember those faces, especially one woman, if she hasn't changed in 30 some years, I would recognize her if I passed her on the street. I just remember those expressions, and they just reached in and grabbed my heart and held on. And I knew that I had found what I had really been looking for and what I really needed. Later on that night, still reeling in the ecstasy of relief and hope, I remembered the afternoon in the bathroom stall at college after my first class, when I was so certain I had found the answer in alcohol. I could clearly see now that had been a lie. That is the description that fits alcohol best for me. It is a lie, an evil, insidious lie. And I chased that lie for a long time, even when it was obvious that I was going nowhere and killing myself while doing it. At that AA meeting, when I looked out over all those faces, I finally saw the truth. When I returned home, I threw myself into AA. I did 90 meetings in 90 days, got a sponsor, joined a home group. I did everything that was suggested. I made coffee, took commitments, and got involved with service. I rode the roller coaster of early sobriety. Every second was worth it to get where I am today. It was very important for my recovery to study and work the steps. To this day, I still make at least 2-step meetings a week. I have a sponsor who guides me through the steps gently but firmly. With a sure-handedness, I hope I'm able to emulate with the 2 women I now sponsor. The promises have begun to materialize for me, and there's still so much work to do. So I still sponsor 2 women. They're not the same 2 women that I'm talking about in this story, but I still do have 2 sponsees. They're challenging. Sometimes I want, and they both have a lot of time. Sometimes I thought when my first few sponsees were very new, all over the place, their heads like pinball machines, just going a mile a minute constantly, calling me all the time. This is before cell phones and before calling me 2 a.m. They call me 2 a.m. because they knew I'd be home, all that kind of stuff. And I look back on it, I would get frustrated back then, but man, did it keep me sober. it got me a lot of 24 hours working, and I'm still in touch with one of them. She came in, she was 18 and she's still sober today. So she has 30 years of sobriety and she's 48 years old. She is a miracle. Anyway, and the step meetings, yes, I did do step meetings a lot. I love step meetings. My new area doesn't have as many step meetings. We have more meetings that change. They're like 1 week it's a big book meeting, 1 week it's a step meeting, 1 week it's a speaker, 1 week it's topic. So I do a lot of those. And I do a literature meeting that does step meetings pretty frequently. But for myself, I read the step book on my own to make sure I keep up with just keep it forefront in my mind, because in my experience, I can always find the answers I need in the steps. It is almost impossible to adequately describe how much the program has given me, even in these 6 short years. I have been financially supporting myself in my own apartment for 5 years, and I plan to buy a house next year. I've secured a good job with a promising future. My income has increased more than 150% since I got sober. I did buy a house the year after with my husband. Like I said, I would next year. And the job that I'm talking about here, I held for 29 years and I retired in February. So I was retirement eligible 3 years ago. And I have been able to retire now at 58 and financially be not wealthy, but fine, secure. I can do that. I can do that now. But it doesn't, sobriety is not a guarantee of those. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that for me, that, I've been given those gifts. It's not a guarantee that everything's going to be great, and I will get to that in a second. Just as material losses are not necessary to indicate alcoholism, material gains are not the true indication of sobriety. The real rewards aren't material in nature. I have friends now because I know how to be a friend, and I know how to nurture and encourage valuable friendships. Instead of the prolonged one-night stands I used to call my boyfriends, there is a special man in my life I've been involved with for almost 5 years. And more importantly, I know who I am. I know my goals, dreams, values, and boundaries, and I know how to protect, nurture, and validate them. Those are the true rewards of sobriety, and they're what I was looking for all along. I am so grateful that my higher power stepped in to show me the way to the truth. I pray every day that I never turn my back on it. I came to AA in order to stop drinking, and what I received in return was my life. So this backing up a little bit, instead of the prolonged one-night stands I used to call my boyfriends, there's a special man in my life I've been involved with for almost 5 years. That was my husband. He and I got married. It took us a while. We didn't get married till we had been together for about 8 years. We got married in 2001. And we had, how they say, well, I don't know if you know, I had heard that if you get involved in a relationship in AA, it's like throwing Miracle-Gro on your character defects. And that was certainly the situation for us. He and I both had a lot of stuff to work on, a lot of issues, a lot of anger issues, and a lot of stuff. We bring a lot with us, especially usually. I mean, for me, I should say, I brought a lot of stuff into sobriety with me, and so did he. We worked through a lot of that. We worked through all, as much as we could. There were some years that were really tough, and we hit our stride, and things were really, really great. We have a daughter. She's now 18, and she is still asleep because it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the US, and she's a teenager, so she's still asleep on Sunday. I digress. My husband, I felt like I had the world by the tail, and things were like like, yes, I know that sobriety doesn't guarantee these things, but wow, have I been fortunate? Have I been extremely fortunate? And I would thank my higher power constantly. Very fortunate. Then one evening, about 4.5 years ago, I could not wake my husband up from his afternoon nap. He had died in his sleep in our bed. Absolutely no warning. Massive heart attack. He seemed perfectly fine. I saw him before he went down to take his nap. He had walked up from the basement where his man cave was, and I was up in this room, my computer room. He had walked up, 2 flights of stairs. He seemed fine. And he went to take a nap, and that was it. That was the last time I spoke to him. And that was hard. That was 4.5 years, and I still miss him terribly. And I miss him from my daughter. My daughter misses him. She was the apple of his eye. And I really thought I was losing my mind. I really thought my sanity was coming unmoored. Everything, nothing. I don't know how to explain it if you haven't been through it. It's just like your entire life, your entire path has just been hit with it's a nuclear wasteland. And yes, there are things that are familiar, people, your job, your home, everything looks familiar, but nothing makes sense. Nothing's aligned anymore. Nothing is cohesive. Everything's just, I can't even describe what my brain was like that first year. Recovering from that shock and recovering from losing him. And there are people I know that have lost spouses in the rooms, and they would come to meetings and just sob or just talk about it. And I would still go to meetings, but I don't recommend this, but for me, I hunkered down and I isolated, and that was not good. But I didn't drink. And then COVID hit right about when I was beginning to emerge. My husband had died in November 2019. And right as I was feeling about ready to get back to the office and back to in-person meetings, well, they were all in person at that point, COVID hit. I was talking to my sponsor. I was talking to a lot of people in the program after he died. There's so much to do. But, so then the Zoom meetings I could do. Zoom meetings were fine. I could do that. But for me, and what I kept hanging on to is even when I felt like everything was going great and my life, I had the world by the tail, I would look at people in the rooms who had lost children. I've seen people who've lost children to suicide, accidents, cancer, whatever, and they were staying sober. They were sharing about it. They were in pain. A lot of their kids had passed away years ago, but they had remained sober. And I saw that and I thought, my God, if they can do that, I can get through anything. So then when my husband died, I remembered those people, both men and women who had lost kids. And I remembered them. And I thought, if they can stay sober through losing their kids, I can stay sober through losing my husband. I can do this. And it wasn't even about this too shall pass. I did not want to hear that. I did not want to hear that, that it was God's will. I did not want to hear that. At where my head was at that point, all I could hear in my head was, don't drink. Don't drink. That was it. That was the level that I was capable of at that point. Don't drink, nothing else. Don't drink. And I did it. Of course there's no guarantees on tomorrow, but as of this point, that was enough. And of course now I'm back back at my meetings, back with my sponsees, and I'd never dropped people. I was just sobbing uncontrollably, and whenever I would see anyone, and I just wasn't able to share, I wasn't able to. And so I was talking on the phone with people, and I was staying in contact in that regard, and I was reading a lot of literature. But as far as working a program, it was just don't drink. And that simple. And I've stayed sober through it. Everyone talks about the 5-year mark being the something special, but to me, it's just another day. If it's a day that I've laughed, and I have laughed, and I've had good experience. That's why we were in Hawaii last year. We were spreading my husband's ashes off the coast of Maui. And it's a tradition with his family. So it was not a great, fun reason to go there, but we made the best of it. He was sober when he died. He died 27 years sober. And I am just so grateful for this program, so grateful for everything, for my relationship with him. I wouldn't have my daughter, still have my daughter. She starts college in the fall. We're going on. Life does go on. I can hear that. I can hear that now. I didn't want to hear it then. But there's no reason to drink. There is never, ever any excuse or any reason to drink. Never, nothing, nada, nil. And if anything, this program, this fellowship, it saved my ass many times, but especially these past 4.5 years. And for that, I am eternally grateful. So I am always thrilled when I'm asked to speak, because I consider it an honor and a privilege to speak at an AA meeting. And I know it'll give me another 24 hours. I just hope it did the same for somebody else. So my head feels light and empty. So I feel that that's all I have. And I want to thank Masi for asking me to speak. And thank you all for being here.
Jen.
Thanks, Jane. That was absolutely amazing. I enjoyed it. I just love what sobriety has given me and given my family. And I thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Whatever about anybody else, you've inspired me.
Thank you, Jane. It's an honour to hear you. My name is Mick, and I am an alcoholic, and it is only by the grace of God and this fellowship that I'm sober today. I love you. I love everyone in this fellowship, because you've given me a gift of life. Thank you.
If you could lead us out with the serenity prayer again, Jen. Thank you.
God, grant us the serenity.
Things I cannot change, courage to change things, and the wisdom to understand the difference.
Back, it works.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.